Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Resilient Riches podcast. We have a tremendous guest for you. He was going to commute on his car, but right now his license is suspended in Israel. So he tried to walk. He couldn't make it past the ocean. But we're really excited to have Eitan Chitayat over there in Israel. You have been incredible with your content. And I know previously you did I Am That Jew, which got over 10 million views. You were on TED Talks. You are a founding member of Entrepreneur Organization, which is just connecting business owners around the world, creative brand director, creative strategist, and a true Israel advocate. And you just did a post talking to all the kids around the world, saying to them, hey, we know you went through COVID and we know you're going through anti-Semitism. And that post has gone viral. And it's really, really amazing what you're doing. You're spending all your time not working and really just trying to help and really just trying to bring awareness. We love people who do this. We're really excited to have you on the podcast. We know you're friends with Kosha Dills, so shout out to Kosha Dills, who was on a couple of weeks ago. But we're really excited to have you. Eitan, can you give us a little bit of your background? And I hope I pronounced your last name right, but it did not sound like I did.
I think you did okay. Chitayat, yeah.
That's it.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and hello to everyone listening. My background, I was born in Israel. I grew up in Hong Kong and London, came back to Israel. I served in the IDF. I did my first degree here, and then I moved to Boston and then New York. So I was in the States for around 13 years, working at some very good ad agencies. I was very lucky as a copywriter, a creative director. And I came back to Israel around 15 years ago, and I founded my own boutique branding agency. I'm married happily with 2 kids, 2 boys, and I'm a brand builder. And yeah, I'm Jewish and Israeli and not afraid.
I love the not afraid part because that's really the key. There's a lot of people that haven't been able to speak out. We had Ellie Beer on the podcast. We had Joe Apfelbaum on the podcast who have been speaking out and saying, I'm not afraid, and I'm going to stand up. It comes from a point in your life that you say, I'm not afraid. I'm a Jew, I'm Israeli, and I'm not afraid. Where does that come from? Because a lot of people right now are really nervous and they're hiding, and it's understandable, and I have nothing against that. But there's a point in time that you decided that you're not going to be afraid, but not only you're not going to be afraid, you're actually going to do something about it. Where does that come from?
I don't know, mate. I think it's just who I am. I've never been afraid to be who I am. So I I'm I'm pretty direct, and my Jewish identity doesn't define me, as it's not everything that I am. I'm many things, but to me it's something that I cherish and I love. So I think there are a lot of misunderstandings in the world about what Jewish people are. There's a lot of people I've met that have never met a Jew, who have never met an Israeli, throughout all of my travels. And from a young age, I think when I was a kid growing up in Hong Kong, which was still under British rule, I went to the British school, which was really international, and all the kids in my class came from different countries, different religions. 30 kids, you name it: Pakistan, Korea, Australia, England, France, America, Africa. And I grew up in a very diverse background. And I still remember there was a kid that used to pick on me for being Jewish. And I never understood that, but that stayed with me. And I think that when you grow up in a diverse environment, then you really, I think you feel that you're surrounded maybe by like-minded individuals or people that are culturally different, and that's okay. Actually, when I moved to London, when I was at 11, maybe 12, I went to a Jewish school, and we got picked on a lot by other schools because we were the Jewish school. So they would throw stones over the gates. We had to have security taking us to the subway, to the underground. And it made me really mad. And it felt unfair. And I think growing up like that, going from a place where in Hong Kong, where there were so many different nationalities and religions and cultures, and then going to England and feeling kind of being in a Jewish school and being treated differently it just has always felt unfair. And I don't like things that are unfair, and not just from a Jewish perspective. If I feel that something is wrong or not right, then I've always spoken up. You know, whether it's in a classroom, which got me in trouble, whether it's in business, which gets me in trouble, and certainly when it comes to being Jewish. But I'm proud, just like a black person is maybe proud of being black, or someone who is gay is proud to be that part of him, you know, is gay or her. It's not something crazy in my eyes to just be proud of who you are and to speak about it openly.
It's funny because my wife grew up in Lugano in Switzerland and went to the school, and I think she had the same response because she also felt a lot of anti-Semitism against her and her sister were in the school system. And I think she also felt that same type of that this is unfair. Why am I being treated so differently? So it's interesting.
So, Eitan, how did you end up in Hong Kong? It's not normal that a Jewish family and Israeli family is living in Hong Kong. Most of the time, it's U.S., U.K., France, Argentina, the States, Canada. What brought your family to Hong Kong?
My dad is Iraqi. He was born in Baghdad, and he moved to Israel. And after he got divorced from the first time, he moved to Japan for 6 years. Came back to Israel. He met my mother. They got married, and because he had been in Japan and he had, met some people, we moved to Hong Kong, and he was the managing director of an American company there for almost 12 years, like 11, 12
Yeah.
years. And so that's where I grew up.
Do you find that when you came back to Israel and you moved to the UK, you saw things very differently than your peers?
Well, I moved from Hong Kong to London. When I was 12 years old, I moved to London, and I stayed in London until I was 19. And that was kind of crazy to go from Hong Kong to London in the 80s, which wasn't fun. And when I was around 16, I started, I'd always come to Israel every year. So I was very familiar with Israel, my family. And when I was 19, I made Aliyah. I came to Israel. I joined the army. I believe, like you, I was a lone soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did my first degree, and I just felt very much at home in Tel Aviv and in Israel, and I always have. So it just feels right here.
Whenever I go, I feel that same feeling. As soon as I touch down, it's here I am. I'm home. I'm home.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's home. And growing up in Hong Kong, my mother made a deal with my dad. She said, if we go to Hong Kong, because like you said, it's not the standard place to move to. She said, if we move to Hong Kong, then I want to come to Israel to see my parents. That's what she told my dad. Every year for at least a month and a half, 2 months for the whole summer. So every single year we were in Israel for a month and a half to 2 months. And of course, as a young boy with my sister, and we spent a lot of time there, and it really just has always felt like a second home until I actually moved there, and then it felt like home. And even when I was living in Boston and New York, it always felt like home. And I was doing quite well in my career in advertising. And then around 15 years ago, I just decided, you know what, I just miss Israel and I miss my parents, and I just want to be home when I came back, which is kind of a crazy thing to do when your career is on a trajectory, and you're not meant to come back to Israel when you're making it. You're meant to come back to Israel when you've made it, or not. But it was home. It still feels like home.
It's how do you bring a small fortune? How do you make a small fortune in Israel? You bring a big one.
Exactly.
That's really the key.
Yeah, so I didn't do that.
No, you were building the fortune, but do you find that your career turned a corner when you moved back to Israel? How did you pivot from that point? You were working in advertising, and then something changed in that transition.
Yeah, I was a creative director at BBDO on the Target and AT&T account, in BBDO New York Digital. And when I came to Israel, I was the executive creative director at TBWA Digital. TBWA Chitayat is the agency that has the Apple account, as you guys probably know. And it was a very prestigious job. I stayed there for a year. And then I just decided it's not for me, because my background is international advertising, international branding. And all of a sudden I was in Israel, and culturally it was very difficult for me to, to lead an agency in Israeli culture. So I left and I started my own little agency. And we, very boutique, very, very boutique, but we started working with Google Africa, Google in New York, Google in England, Google in Israel. We worked with Facebook in London. We worked directly with Apple in California. Some very, very big clients. We worked with YouTube. And then we started working with more international clients, but also we started working with Israeli companies that really wanted to succeed globally. And there weren't that many branding agencies that could deliver what I could deliver because of my background. I was an Israeli living in Tel Aviv, and my specialty was international branding at the highest standards. So it just started evolving. One big client led to another. There have also been some very, very small clients which we've worked with that have gone on to major successes. And I love that, because Israel is such an amazing place for, they call it Startup Nation for a reason, but there are many different businesses that are not only, technology. And I am just blown away consistently by the kind of companies that approach us and the things that they're doing. So it evolved. It's a very interesting place to be in branding. And branding as a profession has grown and steadily improved in Israel. So I don't know if there was one pivotal moment. There have been several. Most of the work that I did that was pivotal was international, like working with YouTube on Space Lab, or the London Olympics, or Chrome experiments with Google, but at the same time branding the Jewish agency for Israel. The global, working with Natan Sharansky, we did that. That's pretty huge. Or working with Nice or Amdocs, or companies that have gone on to be acquired by $1 billion. We've worked with those companies as well.
All right. So why isn't that there's this huge media budget, and there's this huge amount of money coming in talking about branding and pushing and trying to change the narrative to show what Judaism really represents, what Israel really represents. How come, and what are you seeing? Why aren't the agencies stepping up and starting to put funds behind people like you, who are talking directly to the hearts and minds and changing people to stand up and be proud of who you are? Yes, there's a lot of facts that Israel has a right to exist, but we need to talk about the Jewish values and why they're so important. And there's a lot of people who are scared. So what are you seeing right now?
I'm seeing that there are a lot of quote unquote influencers like myself. I mean, I'm an accidental influencer. It's not what I do as a day job. It's something that, I communicate, I express myself, and I have no shame, and I'm a proud Jew, and I'm a proud Israeli, and I'm a brand builder. So I'm very comfortable communicating. And what I'm seeing is that over the course of the last 15, 20 years, there has been a Palestinian narrative that the Palestinians have invested in heavily. Israel is the oppressor. And they've said it to a certain demographic, the left, the woke, Black American communities aligned with Black Lives Matter, saying that we're oppressors. And they've repeated that narrative, and they've doubled down on it, and they put money behind it. And I look at us as the Jewish nation, not as Israel, and I see that we haven't. We have not invested in narrative. We've invested in a lot of things, and we have invested in some narrative. And when I say we, I mean Jewish leadership, Israel, but not nearly enough, and with no real, I think, strategy. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know the people behind it, and I'm certainly not judging. But I think that when you are speaking to the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are maybe marginalized, afraid, feel like they're in a corner. There's always anti-Semitism somewhere. There's an anxiety. But certainly after October the 7th, when it exploded, you have Jewish people feeling absolutely terrified and scared to talk. And why are they scared to talk? They're scared to talk because I don't think that they've been encouraged to speak. They haven't been, their narrative hasn't been reinforced. And I feel personally that that's a mistake. I feel that Jewish leadership and Israel should have been investing over the past couple of decades in our narrative, not a counter narrative, not a response, but who are we? Why are we? Why should we be proud? And why is that important? Because when you are able to express pride, look at Black Lives Matter and the Black American community, look at gay pride and the gay community, look at Me Too, the women's movement, look at Against Asian Hatred and the Asian community. What they did was they galvanized their base by expressing to their community, to their base, what is it that we're proud of? Now,
and what is the
we're
what are
very
the
good
Jews
at
proud of? What are
well,
the Jews proud
we're
of?
very well. Hold on a second. I think we're proud of a lot, and we should be. But like what we do is we do that internally, but we don't do it externally. We haven't done it externally. You see it here and there when there are skirmishes with Israel and our enemies, and you're seeing it big time now with October 7th. But imagine if you had invested in the narrative of the Jewish people, that the Jewish people were consistently reminded and openly speaking about their heritage. Imagine the courage that they would have to speak up against billions of people who are right now putting us down because of propaganda. We need to have a Jewish narrative. We need to have statements, not answers, but our statement. If you look at I'm That Jew, which has been seen almost 15 million times, you mentioned it at the beginning, it wasn't a counter narrative. It wasn't an answer to anything. It was me speaking to my Jewish brothers and sisters, and it was a statement. I'm that Jew. And it was 6 minutes of everything the fuck that we are. Everything, which is us. And I think that we need to invest in that long term so that the world remembers who the Jewish people are, what our contributions are, what our values are, what our morals are. And Jewish people need to sing that from the rooftops, even when we're in Gaza and even when we're killing civilians, because we're not murdering civilians. We are being forced to kill civilians because we're in a war. But it's very hard in an emergency situation to justify what the IDF is doing when you haven't invested in what the IDF actually is on a big scale over the course of decades, which makes me really angry because I think the IDF is the most moral army in the world. Yes, even if civilians are being killed and children are being killed, because we're not trying to do that. We're trying to do the opposite. So when you invest in narrative and you invest in truth, I think that you can galvanize and strengthen your people. And in this case, it's the Jewish people. And we are way behind the curve. We are outnumbered. And we have counter narratives, but not narratives. So everything that you see that I'm doing, guys, is narrative. And it's not necessarily explaining the Israeli position or the Jewish position. It's trying to speak to my audience, which are the Jewish people, and to try and remind them of who we really are and what we actually do and why it is that we actually do it and how we raise our children and how we know to differentiate between what is right and what is wrong and how to stand up to people who lie, how to stand up to bullies, how even when we're massively outnumbered, to stand tall, chin up, and sometimes say, fuck you, and sometimes say, that's not who I am, and sometimes not even say, fuck you, or that's not who I am, but you just say, this is who I am, motherfucker. This is who I am. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to lead that narrative and not do asbara, not do explaining, but speak to the hearts and minds of people, speak to their souls emotionally, because it's my truth. And I think that when we talk about branding, the strongest brands in the world, guys, are the brands that really are based on a truth. And I don't think that BDS, which is behind, boycott, divest, sanction, which is behind the current Palestinian narrative, I don't think it's a good brand. Why? I think they're doing a phenomenal job, 100%. But a good brand is a brand that is based on truth. And I think that in time, this false narrative that the Palestinians have been using will crumble. I think that that brand will kind of not succeed. The Jewish brand, on the other hand, has been around for a long time. It's just not being leveraged. And I'm trying to leverage the truth,
So let me ask you,
which requires money and requires time and work and passion. And that's what I'm trying to do day in, day out.
Yeah,
I'm not doing
and
branding right now.
with an economy that's basically shut down, it's really amazing what you're doing, that most people we know are scrambling to just work and try to feed their family, but you're trying to do more than that. You're going above the letter of the law. The letter of the law is to cover your basis, but you're doing more. I have a few questions for you. One, what do you say to the Jews that are speaking against Israel and speaking against the Jewish community? What do you say to those people? And the second question, I'll ask that after my first question.
The short answer is I don't say anything to them.
So that's the answer.
Right now, right now, the idea is not to talk to the haters and not to talk to delusional people. Right now, it's to speak to Jewish people who are scared, who don't know what to say in their friends' houses, when they meet someone in the street, at business meetings, when they're the Jew in the room. And everyone knows that you're Jewish, so there's a connection to Israel. It can be very uncomfortable. Yeah, say that you're hurting. Say that it's on your mind. Be vulnerable. But with vulnerability comes strength. So say it, share it online, speak up. And to our Jewish allies, those are the two audiences that I'm trying to speak to. Not haters, because haters are going to hate, and not people that I think are delusional. You know, that I'm not going to waste my time on you right now. You know, we'll figure that out later. But right now, there's an emergency situation, which is why, you know, with my branding agency, I made a conscious decision to take that down to 10% and work very, very hard on the clients that we're working with, of course. But I'm really doubling down on the Jewish people because these are my people. And if I can speak and if my voice can resonate, then I think that that's my moral duty and my calling right now. So it's a bit challenging because it's hard to raise money to do this. So I reached deep into my own pockets and I've managed to raise a little bit of money from some people who believe me and believe in me and have seen my work. But yeah, that's the most important thing right now. It's, you know, I'm getting hundreds of messages a day of people just thanking me, which is kind of odd to me, thanking me for speaking up. But many times I'm also told that because I'm speaking up, they're going to speak up. And that's a beautiful thing.
We feel the exact same thing. And when I spoke on Fox about 4 weeks ago, there were two wars that we're battling. One is there's this physical war that Israel's not going to lose. They're the strongest army by far in the region. They're one of the strongest armies in the world for such a small country, which is really interesting because people think Israel's like the size of Iraq. But then you have the social media public opinion war, and which is really what you're battling. And if public opinion sways and fights against Israel, the UN, EU, the US will put pressure on Israel to not complete the job and to not finish off this terror for the rest of the world. And we're really doing the world a service by finishing this off. We have a lot of Christians and Muslims and non-Jews that are reaching out to us as well. And the same thing, tons of messages all the time. And I tell them, we'll take care of these assholes. You take care of the next ones. We'll handle them this time, but the next one is on you.
So you mentioned also that Israel, we know, is a startup nation. It's based on R&D. People don't understand. What does it mean for branding? So for those people, what would be your strategy? What is it that you would want to do? You need to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. Where would that money go? What would you do with that money?
Personally, yeah, I'm trying to raise a few $100,000 for creative, meaning ideation, films, animations that speak to hearts and minds, that speak to the Jewish people and also to our Jewish allies. Everything that I've ever done, and like around almost 30 million views in the last few weeks, it's been organic. And what that means, as you guys I'm sure know, it means it's not paid. It's not paid media. It's just I share it, and many things are going viral. But when you can put money towards amplifying good content, and good content means content that resonates with your audience. It doesn't mean that it's excellent. It means that it's resonating. It's speaking to people. Then when you can amplify that when you can see that, okay, well, this message that you delivered didn't work with the vast majority of people that you thought it would work with, but it really resonated with this 15%. Well, let's deliver that message and go all in on that 15% and see what happens. That's the social media. That's the data, the analytics, and the amplification with paid media that I've never really done before. So you need a sizable chunk for that. I mean, I'm trying to raise, around $500,000 or $600,000 to do that. And I've got to tell you that some Jewish organizations have approached me to help them, but they want their name on it. And I think that, first of all, I think that's very important. I think that Jewish organizations are doing things and good things, and they should continue. But I think that there's also, when it comes to brand, when you see the individual, and there are quite a few people like me who are trying to, we're on a very personal level, putting ourselves kind of like in the line of fire, which I'm proud to do and happy to do. But when I speak into the camera and I say something from my heart and I have independence, then I think I'm one of the people, as opposed to maybe doing it with this organization and it comes with a committee that has to approve it and it has to go through lots of different iterations to please lots of people, and maybe the message is watered down with a logo at the end. So I'm trying to remain independent and just succeed in speaking for my people, so long as my people and my allies or our allies are down with what I'm saying. So far, whether it's I'm That Jew or Star of One or Shalom Motherfucker or Dear Jewish Kids or any of the pieces that I've created or spoken about, it's resonating, and not just me. There's lots of incredible people, and I think that the branding of these people, the work that they're doing, needs to be supported by the Jewish community, and not necessarily from people like me who are giving $250, $1,000 to help soldiers, but there are some wealthy people who give to the soldiers, give to all these people, but give to narrative as well. Because without narrative, the Jewish community is afraid to speak up, and rightly so. But the more people that speak up, the more that you invest in your pride and amplifying and vocalizing your pride, then you can create more confidence and more fight, just like Black Lives Matter. I'm not down with that organization. I mean, Black lives do matter, but I'm not down with that organization. But I look at what they did, and they instilled pride in their people. And gay pride, they instilled pride in the gay community. And women, who should be very proud of who they are, especially when they're being subjugated to misogyny, they created a movement called Me Too. And then once you had that base, then you can get support by speaking up. People need to speak up. I cannot stress the importance of doing that. And we can talk about our arch enemy, Hitler. He had a vision. He had a vision, and he had a team, and he invested a fuck ton of money in his expression of his vision. And that's how he galvanized his base. Now, I'm not saying let's be Hitler, but I'm saying that's how you do it. We haven't done that. We are going to do that. And I want to sit at that table when it happens, because I have a lot to offer. But in the meantime, I just need to keep doing what I'm doing.
There's two sides. I find that you're talking, there's two different audiences. The big corporations, Jewish Federation, Jewish National Fund, Israel American Council. There's people who are part of that. There's a lot of Jews that are part of those organizations. But it looks like you're not talking to those people because they have the Jewish pride, because they're behind it. Jews in general are nomadic people. We're a little bit in a lot of places. Whenever you go to a random town, there's a Chabad there because there's a Jewish community there, which is amazing. They're the best. They're probably the best branded Jewish organization in the world, in my opinion. They are.
Them and Hillel.
Them and Hillel. I would say Chabad is more personally, but that's because I'm more involved. I just love. They're just so they're so committed.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Everywhere you want, anything you want. It's everything. I was in Thailand over the summer, and there's like 2-3 Chabads. Everything's for free. Hundreds of Israelis coming for Shabbat. Guy had to come back.
Hundreds of Jews
coming for Shabbat. He had to come back for the second shift because he couldn't get enough vegan meal for the first. It's unbelievable.
So then there's then what you're targeting and what is a huge number, and probably most of the Jewish world around, most of the Jewish people around the world is like the small business Jews, the people who are their little pockets around the world that feel uncomfortable, that are going to be surrounded. So if I'm sitting in the table and there's 30 other people at the table, I'm the only Jew. But for some people, there's 30 people at the table, 25 are Jews, so they don't feel that they can speak about being Jewish. You're talking to the people who feel alone. And that's what you're doing that's so unique. And that's why you're targeting a very specific type of person. And you're saying, I'm looking to target and help those people to speak up. And if we create light, and right now it's the Hanukkah time, so if we create light, it can eliminate the darkness. We had another a guest on the podcast. Exactly.
There's always been a prevailing feeling among the Jews also. Let's keep our heads down. Don't attract attention. Let's just keep to ourselves, and maybe they won't notice us. I think that's the attitude. That's the attitude you're fighting against, because that's traditionally, I mean, before the Holocaust and even afterwards, like with the parents, let's just keep to ourselves. Don't make waves, and let's see if we could just, sneak our way through it. And I think that's
I'll tell you,
and that's what we got to fight.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story around, 10, 12 years ago. I can't remember exactly when, but there was, when the 3 Israeli boys were abducted, I think it was around 10 years ago. And then we went to war with Hamas. And around 10 years ago, Facebook wasn't what it is today. Jewish people were kind of, abroad. And I'm not talking about Israelis. There was a social media war. It was the first social media war between the Jewish people and people that were not supporting Israel in this justifiable war at the time against Hamas, the same savages. And a colleague of mine at work had posted some anti-Semitic stuff online, not really understanding that it was anti-Semitic, to be honest with you. He's not a terrible guy, but I deleted him because I was like, I'm in a bomb shelter. I'm holding my baby, and he hasn't reached out to me to see who I am, to see how I am. So fuck that. And I just deleted him. He saw that I deleted him, and he wrote to me and he said, you as a Jew should know that genocide is never justified. I'll never forget that he said that. I sat down and I wrote an article, and it ended with, you can have all the hatred you want in the world, but you can't have me and that hatred. So if you're contributing to that hatred and to the demise of my people and me and my baby, then shalom, motherfucker. And that article that I wrote, if you can believe it, got around 200 or 250,000 shares, which means millions of views. It's an article. This was around 10 years ago. So I know what it's like to live abroad. I know what it's like to be a Jew, not in Israel. And it's hard and it's lonely in the international community because people don't understand us. But Shalom Motherfucker went viral as an article. Why? Because for some reason, I was able to tap into the frustration and the unjust behavior and expressions of other people who just didn't get it. And so I wrote something, and then people were able to share what I wrote, and by doing so, express what they were feeling. Imagine if we were able to, as a community, to not rely on a few people to deliver narratives that you could share. But imagine if you could be, and again, it's hard, it's not easy, but you were comfortable enough to speak up for yourself. So I agree with you. You should speak up. You are scared. It is scary, but you need to. And the community should be strengthened because it starts with words. If you keep silent, if you keep things to yourself, if you keep your head down, then it says something about you as a people. It says something. don't keep your head down. Be safe. Don't be stupid, but speak up. And I've been doing that for years because that's a value. I feel proud of who I am, and I feel proud of my people, warts and all. We're not perfect. But when we make a mistake or when something bad happens in our community, I speak up against it because that's also a value. And that's something to be proud of. So I think that Jewish organizations, and I've met with a few, I actually approached a few when I was trying to fundraise, and they looked at me and they're like, no. And then, okay, like 20 million, 30 million views later, I'm still not able to, they have their agenda. They're doing wonderful things on the ground. But when it comes to narrative, I think it's going to come from the public sector. I think it's going to come from
that lonely Jew.
Well, I think it's going to come from.
It's got to come from the lonely Jew because
it's got to come from people.
Yeah, from people.
It's got to come from people. From people.
Not that, and that's the people that we're talking about. Those people that are the ones in the middle, the business owners, the innovators, the disruptors, the life changers. Those are the people that are gonna help change this narrative.
You're saying a grassroots organization, a movement.
Yeah, but it needs to be. It needs to. Yeah, absolutely, grassroots. It just needs. People need to invest in it, and of course, I mean, when I say invest, I mean money. But that's not really what I'm saying. I'm saying you need to understand the power of narrative, the power of brand. When people buy from Nike, they don't like necessarily the company. They like the brand. When people buy from Apple, they like the image of Apple. And those two brands are very true brands. I mean, their values and the reason why they've been so successful in the long run is because they're based on certain truths and certain values that they stick to. And the Jewish people have those values for the most part. It's got all the ingredients. We've got all the good stuff. And there's a way of communicating that to each other to strengthen each other consistently, and also to express that to the world in a way that isn't hopefully arrogant. Like when I did I'm That Jew, I don't think it was an arrogant piece. I think that, when you have 300 people and you're a dancer Jew and you're a businessman Jew and you're a wanderer Jew and a gay rabbi Jew and you're a technology Jew, it's the truth of who we are. So I still think we're those people. And I think that we need to heavily invest in the long run of reminding ourselves of who we are, not necessarily in an emergency situation, in a crisis, but for the long run, so that when we are in a crisis, we can say, hey, we're the Jewish people. We fucking rock. Just like any other people or nation or race or country made up of people, we have our issues, but I think by and large, we're pretty fucking awesome. So invest in that. Yeah, invest in it.
We are awesome.
I think so.
You think so?
Yeah, I do.
It's a level of leadership and it's a level of ownership. And a lot of people are going, oh, the Jews are so successful. There's a Jewish mafia. There's this, there's that. We work really hard. And a big part of our podcast is showing the identity of people, how they got to this point. Everybody looks at, oh, well, they got there, but they don't look at all the stones. How much did we sacrifice? How much did that person sacrifice? And it comes from a lot of challenges. It's not an easy community where you're required to be successful. In our community, in where we grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey, you're required to send your kids to private school if you want them to live an Orthodox or Jewish life. That is not cheap. My two children's schools for like 3.5 hours a day is somebody's salary. That is a very hard pill to swallow. And a good salary. So I have to work extremely hard. I have to be extremely tenacious. I have to be extremely assertive to build this. And that's the success of the Jewish people, is that number one, you have these huge expenses, so you really got to work really hard to make money. But number two is that you're pushed at a young age to think differently. And what's happening across the world, and there's all these pictures of different presidents holding the Talmud, for example. A Talmud forces you to think differently. That our schooling, I would wake up, we'd start school at like 7 a.m. and we finish at 5:45. Then we'd wrestle. We'd start 30 minutes later, and we wouldn't get home till 9. Most kids, and then we go and we wrestle against the other schools and we get our asses kicked because we're like exhausted. And they're like, "What do you mean? We wrestle 6 days a week. That's what we do for a living." And when we had Kendall Cross, he was like, "What do you mean? You didn't wrestle 7 days a week?" I was like, "No, we had Sabbath. We couldn't wrestle." But it's amazing what you're saying. And I love what you're saying. And we need to have so much pride for what we are. And I think that if everybody stood outside and put a picket fence and said, "I am that Jew," or "I am a Jew," or Jewish pride, but not coining it from somebody else, people will start to understand us. And a lot of people will come out of the woodwork, and a lot of people will feel proud instead of fear. And even though we are small, we are mighty.
I think. First of all, that's a that's a banner that I have prepared, by the way, which says "We are small, but we are mighty." So you'll see that coming out soon. But
That's good.
I think it's a question of values, meaning I sometimes get emotional, so I'll try to keep my composure right now.
You can get emotional.
That's the best
No,
part.
I know I can.
That's the best part.
I was just screaming
That's the
and
best-
ranting
that's
for
the
5
best
minutes.
part.
Don't you worry.
Sure. No, I'm not worried. I can burst into tears at any moment, but then I go off a little. It's a question of values, meaning this is who we are. We are people of the book. I'm not religious. I'm completely secular. I mean, Chagim, Chanukah, Purim, Pesach. I love it. I go to synagogue, but I'm not religious. I'm secular. I love my heritage, though. But we're people of the book. And yeshiva, what do people in yeshiva do all day? They learn and they debate. They wrestle with words. They wrestle with narratives. They communicate with each other. It's hard. They argue. I think that that's where we come from. We push. We don't, it's not easy. It's not easy. And I think that's in branding, I call that the what. That is what we are. Now, how we go about translating that into a narrative, I said right now, we are awesome. Because as a person, I can say that. Now, as a brand, I don't think that we should be arrogant. I think we have our faults like anyone else. And if you look at the TED Talk that I did, I say we're the same, but we're different. We're the same as everyone, just a little different. But we're actually the same, but different.
It's like in Thailand.
I think,
same but different.
Same but different. So I think that what you were talking about are Jewish values. And it's not about the success. It's about what is at our core, which is family, kindness, empathy, working hard,
compassion,
educating,
compassion.
And these are at the base. Now, to a hater, they'll say, "Yeah, but look at the IDF." Okay, great. Well, let's look at the IDF. Let's look at the values of the IDF. I was in the IDF. Let's look at purity of arms. We have to double down on our values and make people understand who the Jewish people are based on who we really are. And that's why when something bad happens within the Jewish community, outwardly sometimes, I speak about it because I think that's one of the Jewish values. I try and tell my children, when you're wrong, you say you're wrong. That makes you a mensch. You don't, that's what you do. To me, that's a very Jewish approach. And I don't know if anything that I'm saying is making sense to you, but I think that I'm trying to differentiate between let's remind ourselves of what we are and who we are, and then let's express to the world in a way that is true and honest. How should we express who we are? And I think that that's something that we need to do. And that requires some humility. It requires some arrogance. It requires showing vulnerability. It requires ingenuity. And it requires also some self-reflection sometimes, So that's what I'm trying to just be who I am, and as a human being, And at the core of my human beingness is the fact that I happen to be Jewish. So, and I think that a lot of Jewish people are like that. So I think we have to find the way to be brave and to express, and
So I
through
would say,
expression come together.
I would say, especially now at time of Hanukkah, I mean, not to make it too religious because here doesn't let me, but we're supposed to be a light unto the nation. We're supposed to show our values to the rest of the world. And I think this is the way to do it. This is what we need. We need to share that narrative with the rest of the world to show them what they should be doing.
I agree, but when it comes to we're a light unto the nations and everything, I mean, maybe, but when I sit down and I talk to my son, I don't tell him you're a light unto the nations. I just try and teach him how to be a good human being.
And that's how.
And
you
maybe
do
that's
it.
the same.
That's
maybe
exactly
that's
how you do it.
Maybe that's what it is. But I think when we get into, well, we're a light unto the nations, which I say and I believe in everything, it can sometimes come across as a little bit arrogant. And I'm not saying I disagree. I'm saying that ultimately I think we contribute to humanity, and that's a good thing, and that's light. And
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
And I think we should be doing more of that, and not because of October 7th. We should have been doing it yesterday. Absolutely. And God, I need some help to get people to understand that and help me do it. So
I don't think you need
but
help.
I want to say one thing, because I want to show this to your viewers, because I don't know how many are Jewish or Israeli, but I'm wearing right now.
Oh, this one?
Are you wearing it as well? Right. So this says "Bring them home now." I'm also trying to do everything to bring awareness to our hostages. I don't know when the podcast is coming out, but our hostages who are still being held by these savage butchers. So I'm walking around with this and just keep these guys front of mind. We're with our hostages right now and their families. So it's just very important for your viewers.
I don't know how you could talk about any ceasefire and not about the hostages. I don't know how that's even possible. Give me back my hostages and I'll talk about a ceasefire.
Well, it's possible when it's an upside down world, because one side has succeeded in duping the world with a false narrative. That's how it's possible.
Exactly. 100%.
I want to bring this back to what Resilient Riches and what this podcast is all about.
Sure.
When we talk about Resilient Riches, we don't talk about money. This podcast has only been talking about riches in the biblical sense. Success, what you're passionate about, taking your values and showing it out to the world. We do a game with our in-person guests that we find their core values through a deck of cards that we're able to understand their 5 core values. You gave it to us when we were actually going to ask you, what are your core values? And then you said it to us. So you really read our minds. You must have been doing your homework on the podcast. So we appreciate that.
What was the core value?
The core, you did your counting. You did your family, empathy,
courage, compassion.
All you gave him compassion. You didn't take compassion.
He agreed with me.
He agreed because he's nice. He's nice, and kindness was one. I mean, he used his kindness to agree.
I think he was still good. I want to say that he's still good.
It was in there. It was in there somewhere.
It's in there. But what I love that you're doing is you are talking about the success and building riches through your voice and through impact. Part of riches is being successful in anything you choose. It happens to be what you're choosing to do is get to as many people and give pride to people who are afraid and who are scared and feel lonely. You were like that maybe as a child when you were surrounded by people and you were the only Jew there and you always wanted to be proud and you said it and you stood up for yourself. Now you're empowering those people and people that the younger you or the old self you to be proud. And if they do that, they will find success. I mean, you've worked with some of the most amazing companies in the world. That didn't happen by accident. You're reaching 20, 30, 50 million people. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you have a mission. You're true to yourself. And that's something that we are. We went through very tough financial times. What we do is we empower people. We help people lower their stress levels on their financials to allow them to live a better, more fulfilling life, because we had the stress on ourselves and we know how to alleviate it. We know how to pinpoint it, and we know how to rip it away and help people, help other people. We have spoken to thousands and thousands of people across the country, giving seminar after seminar. I've done 3 seminars back to back, 3 2-hour seminars back to back just to help and empower people.
And not to be afraid. Exactly what
and
you're saying.
Talk about this. And it's so amazing what you're doing. And it's the epitome of our values and your values. And even if you're so far away, the values are the same. I don't look at, and I say before, I don't look at people anymore. And I don't say, oh, you're an Israeli. Oh, you're French. Or you're this. You're a Jew. You're my family. That's all it is. There is no Israel for me anymore. There's just Jews around the world, and we're all together. And there's a lot of us that are lonely, but we want to bring them closer to us, and I want to protect them.
And October 7th, that really emphasized that we are all Jews. We're all one. And whether you see Hasidim dancing with modern and not Jewish or secular, not Jewish, secular, you see them. We saw videos of them dancing in the highways, just everybody together, and that was what emphasized. I think what happened October 7th just showed us that we're just one big family. That's what we are. Whatever your politics are, whatever your own personal habits or whatever it is that you're doing, we're all still Jewish. We're all still, it doesn't make a difference.
Eitan, how can people find you? Tell us where they can see you. Obviously, when your posts go viral, they can find you, but tell us a little bit about you and your company.
Sure. Well, my company is a company called Natie Branding Agency. You can see my branding work there, which is natie.com. And like I said before, my emphasis right now is advocacy, Jewish and Israel advocacy. There is a foundation that believes in me, and they've set up a page where people can donate to my mission. If you go to I'm That Jew, which is IMTHAT Jew, JEW.com, I'mThatJew.com, you can get to that page. There's a donate page there. I don't know. It's to me, it's very difficult to talk about branding right now and what I do with all these companies, international companies, when our people are in the midst of this crisis. So I would welcome people going to what I'm really trying to do, which is advocacy right now, before I push them to my branding agency site, which is a terrible thing to say as a businessman, but there you go. That's the truth.
We'll have you back on the podcast when this is over, so we can talk about what you do for a living, not just what you do for advocacy. We're happy to give $1,000 to you and to your cause to help bring and change the narrative. So that'll be something that we're coming from personally just to you. We hope people can do the same. It's really amazing what you're doing. We really appreciate it. We understand what this narrative means, and we understand exactly what you're doing, and we're 100% behind you.
No, I mean, this is what we need to do. We need to do, I can't understand why we haven't developed a narrative and why we can't talk about against BDS and why are they so successful. It makes no sense to me why we haven't.
But if I can say this, it should make sense to you now. When you have an entity that has decided that they have a mission, then they define their mission, just like any company does. We have a vision, we have a mission. Great, what is it? You decide what that is. Then you go to the next stage, which is, well, how do we express that? Who do we express that to? And let's make sure that we do it consistently and put money behind it. That's how BDS and the what I believe is the false Palestinian narrative. I'm not talking about the fact that Palestinians are not good people, and I'm talking about the movement that we're seeing that has brainwashed young Americans. It's a false narrative, but that's how they did it. What's not to understand? That's how they did it.
That's true.
And what we have not done is we have not defined our mission. We have not defined our vision as the Jewish people. We have not figured out how to express that. We have certainly not targeted anyone, and we've certainly not put lots and lots of money behind it. But boy, oh boy, when we do, we've got the best brand in the world.
100%. We have a great product. We just don't have a great marketing team. But thank you for joining that marketing team.
Well, it's my duty.
Thank you, Eitan. Eitan, We love you. We appreciate
thank
you.
you.
It's great to see an
Thank
old
you.
Chayal Boded. And when I was in the Army, I was paid very well. I made $300 a month. Everybody else around me made $100 a month, so I was the rich guy. I paid for the cola at the little shook there because everyone was like, "Oh, he's American, he's rich." I was like, "Yeah, I'm not, but I am making 3 times as much as you."
Yeah, for them they were.
I am making 3 times as much as you. So it's just the multiple of what's your baseline is really the key. But Eitan, thank you so much for coming here. We'd love to see you on your next TED Talk after you make 100 million views and 500 million views and you change the world. And that's what we all are doing. The world is a messy place. People just need to pick up a broom and a shovel. And I'm one of those people. My dad's one of those people. And you're one of those people. So thank you for everything that you're doing. We'll see you when life calms down. And we're going to talk about your business. And we want to hear about what you're doing for actual profit. Eitan, speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Sir.